Well, in week 3, we examine aggression and violence in human behavior as it relates to crime and deviant behavior. Um, Defining aggression is difficult. And if you've already read the appropriate chapter in your textbook, you'll see the author states that as well. A simple definition of aggression could be the intent and attempt to harm another individual, physically or socially, or in some cases to destroy an object. Now that's an overly simple definition, particularly because it doesn't seem to work well for passive-aggressive type behavior, which are aggressive in intent, but are passive or indirect in action. A better definition could be behavior intended to cause harm or humiliation to another person who is not a consenting participant. Keep in mind, even in our criminal codes, consent is a justification or a defense against assault. According to Reed-Malloy, modes of aggression may include acts of violence, but not necessarily. On the other hand, aggression is a necessary component of all acts of violence. Aggression is also a component of normal behavior that has a neural basis that is similar between animals and humans. In other words, it is normal behavior. I believe we talked in previous weeks that among children, aggressive behavior up until 48 months is normal. So aggression is certainly an interesting topic and not something we normally think is of normal, but it is. Violence, on the other hand, if we're trying to define aggression and violence, violence is a behavioral manifestation of aggression that involves some sort of overt threat or the application of force or both. Particularly the use of force that is likely to result in injury. Now, your textbook gives you some different types, different ways to classify or add some sort of typology for aggression. And I'd kind of like to add to what's in the textbook by giving you another slightly other way to look at aggression, two other types. This is not two other types in addition to what the textbook gives you, but just a slightly different way of looking at and defining aggression. The first of these two types that I would give you is affective aggression. That's affective with an A, not an E, A-F-F-E-C-T-I-V-E. Affective aggression is often the result of a reaction to some sort of external or internal stimuli that threatens the individual. Usually this is accompanied by threatening and defensive postures and increased vocalization. Think of it as two young men in the schoolyard or in a prison yard that have come to some sort of disagreement that's starting to lead up towards conflict, and you watch that behavior as both young men will tend to get louder in their conversation. They'll kind of puff up their chests a little and attempt to look more threatening or intimidating to the other person. Consider affective aggression to be a defensive behavioral response to stimuli which threatens the individual. Could be a defensive reaction to fear. Affective aggression has, probably the easiest way to define it, or examine it, is look at its characteristics, and it does have several characteristics common to affective aggression. These include intense sympathetic arousal, the automatic nervous system. So there's your biological component. Remember, your automatic nervous system is that function of the human body that controls automatic functions, those functions that we don't control, like breathing. And so there is with affective aggression, there are some physical responses for which we don't control. Think of the stereotypical fight or flight response. With affective aggression, the heart rate increases, the body prepares itself to fight or flee. Other characteristics of affective aggression include a subjective experience of conscious emotion. In other words, our emotional responses are subjective to the situation. We could have some reaction and immediate violence with affective aggression. One of the defining characteristics of affective aggression is its goal, and its goal is threat reduction. Remember, aggression is not necessarily violence, but could include violence. But think about those schoolyard behaviors again, the loud vocalization, the standing up and puffing up the chest and trying to look more intimidating. That is aggression with the goal of trying to reduce threat, trying to get the other party to back down or back off or to go away. Affective aggression also includes a rapid displacement of target. There is a time-limited behavioral sequence. In other words, there is the aggression, the behaviors that are associated with affective aggression are limited in time to the existence of the threat. When the threat goes away, the behavior associated with the aggression also goes away. Affective aggression is often prefaced by some sort of public ritual. There is a possible loss of reality testing where we don't actually, in the moment of the threat, our perception of what's going on may be altered, and there is, with affective aggression, lowered self-esteem. Remember, it is a defensive mechanism designed towards reducing threat. And so, particularly with stereotypical males, there is a lowering of self-esteem associated with feeling like you need to reduce threat or being scared. Though, reality, fear is sometimes what keeps us alive. The other type of aggression is predatory aggression. And unlike affective aggression, predatory aggression is purposeful and directed aggression. It is intentional rather than being a conditioned response or an automatic response to a perceived threat. Predatory aggression is intentional. It is not threat responsive, but rather it is provoking. It is directed. Perhaps it's best to describe List's characteristics. Predatory aggression includes minimal automatic nervous system arousal. In other words, where the body prepares itself to fight automatically. With affective aggression. With predatory aggression, it's purposeful. It's not part of the automatic nervous system. It is actually the individual preparing himself for conflict, whether it's physical or emotional or social conflict. Predatory aggression involves, again, planned or purposeful violence. If violence is going to occur, remember, violence does not always occur with aggression. Predatory aggression involves predetermined and sometimes variable goals. Remember, the key here is there is purpose behind this aggression. There is very, very little displacement of target. It's, again, focused. We're going to stay focused on our goal. Here, rather than being time limited, it is a time unlimited behavioral sequence. Predatory aggression is not limited to the time span of a threat, which is a fairly short period of time, but rather it is aggression that is sustained over a long period of time. with the purpose of achieving goals. It has there's unimpaired reality testing, and predatory aggression includes heightened self-esteem. Usually the aggressor in a conflict, and this is an individual that has higher self-esteem. They are on the attack. They're moving towards a goal with some purpose. Next, I'd like to talk about some theoretical perspectives on aggression. And some of these, I think most of these are in your textbook, but I'm going to see if I can try to clarify the concepts in the text a little bit. The first one I'd like to talk about is the psychoanalytical viewpoint. This is based on the work of Sigmund Freud and his belief that humans build up aggressive energy over time, and that we only have so much capacity. We can only store up so much of this aggressive energy. We're like some of those rechargeable batteries, the battery on your phone. You can't just charge it indefinitely. There's a limit. The problem is with people, according to Freud, is once you reach that limit, and he called that limit a saturation point, the person may explode, or the aggressive behavior must be expressed somehow to release tension. Maybe rather than thinking of it like your phone battery, think of it like a tea kettle. I know most of you guys are really young. You're like, tea kettle? What's that? And that's what we peak tea and then we use. That's what the coffee maker is for. Maybe you are familiar with them. It used to be in the days when you heat water for tea. You put it in this little kettle. You put the water in the kettle. You put it on the stove, and the water boiled. And when it was ready, when it met its point where it could hold no more pressure inside the kettle, it would explode out with steam, and that steam through a small hole would create a whistling sound. That's how you knew your water was ready for tea. I don't know many people that still use a tea kettle, but some of you may have seen one. Maybe your grandma had one. For those of you older folks in the class, fortunately, the magic of video is you can't throw anything at me, which would also be a behavioral manifestation of aggression. At any rate, Freud says you reach a saturation point, the individual may explode. They have this discharge of pent-up aggression. They can hold so much. And think about your own lives. Think about frustration. The bills are due, and the demanding professor and his long-term paper, and all the demands, and the kids, and the job, and the work, and it's just, you get to a point where you're like, I can't take it anymore, and you explode. Well, you've reached your saturation point. Freud says you have to let go. Freud says that we do find a way to appropriately discharge pent-up aggression. This is a method called catharsis. This need for a cathartic or catharsis was actually part of the point behind the creation of some of the great tragedies. You went to see a Shakespearean tragedy, and the whole idea was that the play would wrench on your emotions to the point where you would have this cathartic reaction. You would release the pent-up emotions through the sadness and the sorrow of reacting to this overly sad play where, everyone dies in the end. That's kind of the point behind the tragedies. The Romans had a similar deal. They called it the Colosseum. In modern society, we have our appropriate ways to discharge pent-up aggression through vicarious experience. We go to football games, or we watch boxing matches, or the new thing, the UFC. We watch violent movies. That's a form of catharsis, a way to expel those energies. And I think I'm going to end the first part of this video here, and then I'll pick up in part 2 with frustration aggression hypothesis.